Throughout history, there have been people who have committed some of the most heinous crimes fathomable. For those crimes, they have been convicted and sentenced to death. Welcome to Death Row Executions, where we take a look into the lives of society's worst offenders. And now, your host, Air.
Ronald Taylor was born on September 30th, 1960. Between the years of 1990 and 1999, Ronald had been treated multiple times for his mental health issues. A couple of those hospitals were Mayview Hospital and St. Francis Hospital. During that time frame, Ronald was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and there is no documentation on whether or not he took medication for his schizophrenia. By the year 2000, Ronald was living in an apartment at 1208 Wood Street in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania. One day, while living in his new place, Ronald was feeling in the dumps and thought he would not make it to see the next day. He wrote a 4-page letter for anyone who would read it. The title of the letter read, "Whoever reads this should feel free to contact former counselors to let them know I finally followed through with my plan." His letter was unorganized and contained uppercase and lowercase letters throughout the words, but it went on to read, "To my family, starting with you, mother who I love so much. I know this will probably destroy your life, but I've been suffering physically for too long. I've been experiencing so many different health problems from the time that I was born till now. I've been patient year after year, decade after decade with my health, but I decided to end it all. So, Jesus Christ, you no good, heartless, evil bias, favoritism, Jewish, cold blood, and most of all, the entire world. I'm sorry, Mother, for with your gun that I sneaked for the second time in 2 years. Try to understand when a person is physically suffering for a long time, and I'm treated by racist, biased doctors and nurses who so often give me generic, cheap medication that is ineffective and causes return visits to emergency rooms. That frustration so often sets in. I get fed up with doctors treating black patients differently from whites in terms of unfairness, unequally, and like dirt. Jesus Christ made a very costly mistake putting white people on the face of the earth. I'll see all of my enemies in hell. Ha 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 ha. As long as the system remains racist white and racist Jew, black people will never overcome. Poor blacks will remain poor, with no hope as God continues to look down on us with complete neglect and no intervention. Ronald then mentions more about whites, Jews, Asians, Italians, white police officers, feds, and Uncle Tom blacks. He praises some questionable people in his letter and calls America the United Snakes of America. With Ronald's mental state, it seemed like everything set him off. Supposedly, there had been a long-running dispute over Ronald's broken door, and Ronald felt that the two maintenance workers, John Kroll or JK, and John DeWitt, aka JD, were taking too long to attempt to fix his door. It is unclear if Ronald was experiencing delusions or negative effects of his schizophrenia, but Ronald felt as if the two maintenance workers, who also happened to be white, were racist and against him. Ronald was quoted calling JD and JK racist white pigs and dirty white trash. Finally, on March 1st, 2000, in what seemed like forever to Ronald, JD and JK finally started working on Ronald's door. Not only did they take long to start working on his door, but Ronald grew more angry and frustrated because he felt they were taking too long to fix his door that day. JD responded to Ronald and told him that people like him are the reason there is racial tension in the world. After making his statement, JD knelt down on the ground in order to pick up some of his tools that were in the hallway outside of the apartment's front entrance. When JD knelt down, Ronald stood over him and gave JD an angry look. After noticing Ronald's behavior, JD stood up with a hammer by his side. Looking at JD, Ronald said to him, "You think you're pretty tough?" Ronald left, but he was not able to refrain from the negative tension for long and returned back to his place. Upon returning, he said to JD, "You're a dead man. You have to come back to this building." JK and JD then left Ronald's specific apartment and then left for the apartment building's basement. In the basement was fellow maintenance worker Andrew Williams, who was noted in court documents to have been an African-American man. John DeWitt left John Kroll and Andrew in order to assist a different resident with their maintenance request. Ronald returned to his empty apartment and equipped himself with his mother's .22 caliber revolver. The revolver, along with ammunition, was placed in a small pouch. After equipping himself with the gun and ammo, Ronald put lighter fluid on his couch, lit it, and then left the apartment, leaving the door wide open. Leaving the fire to spread, Ronald went looking for J.D. He was searching everywhere and could not find him. He finally made his way to the apartment's basement and yelled out, "Where are you, I'm going to get you. I got something for you." Andrew and J.K. noticed the brown pouch Ronald had that had his gun in it, so they pleaded with Ronald not to do anything he would regret. Their pleas meant nothing, and Ronald ended up pulling out his gun and shouting multiple times, "I got something for you." He then went to the boiler room hoping to see J.D., but there was no one there. Ronald, angered that he could not find J.D., left the basement, but J.K. and Andrew were following him and begging him to calm down. Ronald stopped in his tracks, turned around to face the maintenance workers, and then fatally shot J.K. in the chest. Ronald then left the apartment complex and made his way to a nearby Burger King by foot. The fire in his apartment had reached his ceiling and the hallway, but the fire department arrived fairly quickly, and they were able to put out the fire fast enough so that no one was injured. Sitting inside of a booth at the Burger King was a 71-year-old white man by the name of Joseph Healy. Ronald made his way to Joseph and, without speaking a word, fatally shot him in the back of the head. Joseph was a retired priest and spent his time reading to children every day, which earned him the nickname Storytelling Joe. Ronald casually walked out of the Burger King and then walked to a nearby McDonald's where he saw a white male by the name of Richard Klinger sitting alone in his van. Ronald shot Richard, and although Richard survived his gunshot wound, he suffered permanent brain damage and he was paralyzed on the right side of his body. After shooting Richard, Ronald walked into the McDonald's where he saw 26-year-old manager Stephen Bustard. Ronald walked behind the counter and shot Stephen in the head. Stephen also survived his gunshot wound to the head, but he did suffer permanent injuries. Ronald then left the McDonald's and walked towards the cars that were waiting in the drive-thru line. He saw another white male named Emil Sanielvici. Ronald put his head through the passenger window to look inside of his car. He ended up walking away, but Emil rolled down his window to ask Ronald what he wanted. This angered Ronald, and he shouted back, "What do I want? What do I want?" He walked towards the driver's side of Emil's car and fatally shot him from a couple of feet away. By this time, many witnesses were calling 911, and Ronald knew authorities would be looking for him. He made his way to a nearby apartment complex at 416 Ross Street and bumped into a random tenant. Ronald Taylor told Ronald Washington to come here, but Washington refused. He changed his mind, though, as soon as he noticed the gun. Ronald Taylor then said, "This isn't for you, it was for these crackers." Ronald then reloaded his gun on a set of stairs and went into an apartment of a black woman by the name of Christine McCrae. Christine lived on the ground floor and left her back door open, which is why Ronald was able to easily get inside. When Christine spotted him, Ronald told her to be quiet for a few minutes while he collected himself. He then told Christine that he was just out to get white people. Ronald asked Christine if she had any guns or a car he could use. She replied by saying no. He then asked her if there were any white people who lived in the building, and she replied that she did not know. With that, Ronald walked up to Christine, kissed her on the forehead, and left the apartment. Wilkinsburg police officers Daniel Kufi and Michael Minson were looking for a suspect and had noticed Ronald crossing the street. They did not know at the time that he was the shooter they were looking for. The officers actually stopped their police vehicle to let Ronald cross the street, but Ronald was unaware of the fact that the cops did not know he was the shooter, so instead of proceeding to walk away, he turned around and shot the officers. Ronald let off 3 shots before he ran off into the Penn West building and into the offices of the Metro Family Medical Practice. The first person he saw was a white female receptionist by the name of Patricia. Ronald walked up to her, hushed her, and then asked if there was anyone else in the office. She told him there was another female in the file room. Upon receiving that information, Ronald grabbed Patricia and led her to the file room where the other employee, Debbie, was. A white female nurse named Joyce Ambrose then walked into the file room and asked Ronald if he needed help with anything. By this time, a black employee named Bill Simonton was close by, and Ronald made eye contact with him and said, "She doesn't know what time it is." Ronald then took Patricia, Debbie, and Joyce down the hall at gunpoint. He left Bill and another black employee alone. Once in the hallway, Ronald said to the women, "You don't know how many people I've killed. I just killed 5 people. I have 1 bullet left, and I'm going to use it on one of you. I just don't know which one it will be." Ronald began toying with the women and waving the gun back and forth. Minutes later, a black employee by the name of Barbara Pippins walked into the hallway, but Ronald immediately told her, "You're okay, sister. Get out of here." After Barbara walked away, Ronald decided to shoot Debbie and pointed the gun at her head. He then said, "You look like a smart white." Ronald changed his mind, lowered his gun, and said, "No, I think I'll terrorize you for a while. Come on." Debbie pleaded with Ronald, and in that moment, Ronald saw another employee by the name of Dr. David Freeman walk into the examination room. Ronald went to go look for Dr. Freeman, which gave the women who were held captive the opportunity to escape. While this was happening, a police officer by the name of Paul Tomko entered the building in order to help everybody evacuate. Eventually, Officer Tomko was face to face with Ronald. Ronald pointed his gun at the officer and then at himself. He asked multiple times how many people he was able to kill that day, and he also brought up racism and God. Police Sergeant and Negotiation Specialist John Fisher entered the building, and he was speaking with Ronald for hours in an attempt to get him to lower his weapon and end the standoff. Officer Fisher asked Ronald what happened that day, and Ronald replied by saying that JD, he pushed me too far today. He went overboard. I couldn't take it anymore, that white mother trucker. He then admitted to Officer Fisher that he was the one who set his apartment on fire and told him, "You tell JD that he's lucky I didn't get to him today. He's lucky he got away." Officer Fisher's efforts were successful, and Ronald finally surrendered and was immediately taken to the police station. Media had gathered around to get a shot of the killer that was just captured, and a friendly officer asked Ronald whether or not he wanted his face covered. Ronald replied by saying, "I'm proud of what I did. I don't need anything to cover my face." He then finished by saying he should have ended things himself because he did not want to spend the rest of his life in jail. After being arrested, Judge Jeffrey A. Manning Jr. declared that Ronald was incompetent to stand trial on April 25, 2000. Ronald was directed to be admitted to Mayview Hospital for treatment and evaluation and to be medicated until he became competent. A couple of months later, on June 28, 2000, the Commonwealth petitioned the court to permit psychiatrist Dr. Michael Wellner to have access to Ronald's medical records. He learned of Ronald's previous medical treatments, but on July 6, 2000, after interviewing Ronald, he told the trial court that Ronald was now competent to stand trial. With that declaration, the courts requested for Ronald to be taken out of Mayview Hospital and for the Department of Corrections to produce Ronald for trial on July 28, 2000. A new judge was assigned to Ronald's case, and Ronald was also appointed an attorney. The following year, Dr. Wellner was supposed to conduct another interview with Ronald, but Ronald refused to cooperate with Dr. Wellner and take part in any interviews or questioning. On May 21, 2001, the Commonwealth filed a motion with the trial court ordering Ronald to cooperate with the interviewing process. If he failed to cooperate in a meaningful manner, it would result in excluding evidence of any mental infirmity defense or mitigation at any stage of the proceeding. The very next day, Dr. Wellner was able to interview Ronald for a few hours, but eventually Ronald grew tired and refused to continue the interview. Dr. Wellner testified that he needed 15 hours of interview time to make any conclusions. Over the next few days, there were more attempts from the court and Dr. Wellner to get Ronald to continue on with the interview process. By May 25th, Dr. Wellner was only able to get 6 to 8 hours of interview time with Ronald, but the Commonwealth's request to bar Ronald from raising the defense of insanity was barred. Dr. Wellner, however, concluded that Ronald was competent to stand trial again. Ronald's trial officially commenced on November 1st, 2001, and he was convicted of 3 counts of first-degree murder. With admitting that he intentionally killed the people he did on that fatal day, the jury did not have a hard time concluding that Ronald, beyond a reasonable doubt, intentionally, deliberately, and with premeditation, killed Mr. Kroll, Mr. Healy, and Mr. Sanilovici. Each victim was unlawfully killed, and the location in which they were shot showed intent. His goal was to kill white people for their racism, but his crimes were hate crimes themselves. On November 11, 2001, there was a penalty phase hearing, and the jury unanimously concluded that the aggravating factors outweighed the mitigating factors and accordingly came back with 3 death sentences. The defense did try to concede that Ronald had committed the killings, but attempted to offer into evidence testimony from both Ronald and a psychiatric expert that would show he had brain injuries and a frontal lobotomy. The trial court, however, refused to permit the testimonies. On January 11, 2002, the trial court imposed the death sentences, along with a consecutive sentence of 115 to 230 years in prison for the remaining convictions. Ronald's first automatic appeal was on February 8, 2002. In the appeal, Ronald claimed that although he knew the difference between right and wrong and was competent to stand trial, he had a diminished capacity to understand and process information, to communicate, to abstain from mistakes, to learn from experience, to engage in logical reasoning, to control impulses, and to understand others' reactions. He also claimed that if a jury had been instructed as to diminished capacity, they would have considered that he was a psychotic man who manifested his paranoid schizophrenia through a lifetime of bizarre rituals and practices that culminated on March 1, 2000. In conclusion, his psychiatric evidence would have served to negate the element of specific intent and resulted in a verdict of third-degree murder instead. The Commonwealth concluded, however, that neither instruction was required and that the defense of diminished capacity was unavailable to Ronald in light of the evidence presented by the Commonwealth and confirmed by Ronald's own psychiatric expert that he was capable of forming specific intent to kill. All of Ronald's appeals have been denied, and he is currently being held at SCI Green Correctional Facility.